Divas, it's Jen. This is another episode of Reframing Me, and I'm your host, Dr. Jennifer Brubaker. Welcome back to the show. I am so grateful that you have chosen to come here again with me today. And I am super excited because, y'all, I'm trying to do something different. And I told you maybe last episode, no, 2 episodes ago, I told you that I was thinking about trying to expand into having video. And so I'm recording myself. I've never done this before, but I have the camera on my computer going and I have a camera going. And so who knows? God only knows what I'm going to get here. But I don't know why I feel compelled to try this, but I'm like, you know what? I am being drawn to it by the universe. And so maybe there's a reason I'm being drawn to it. And it's also maybe it could be because I did tell you in the last Jenison episode that it is snowy. Like for those of us here in Wilmington, it has been a cold and snowy week and it's kept us housebound. And honestly, I am like just barely made it through without going totally stir crazy. If you can see me in the video, if it ever actually makes it anywhere, I have a Starbucks because I ventured out of the house for the very first time today since like Tuesday, I think. And it's Friday and I ventured out of the house for the first time. And so that was so exciting, but I got myself a Starbucks. Now, snow days, they are such an anomaly here that I think that I wasn't anticipating it to impact me the way that it did, because this week it's like we haven't had a snow day in forever. Okay. In the past, I think that weather days have always been like the most fun. All right. We love hurricane days around here. I mean, especially the ones that don't have like strong, like destructive hurricanes, but like the ones that, oh, wait, that didn't end up being anything. But we still were like all cocooned off and all together. And we have had ice storms in the past, and sometimes we'll get lots of rain. And so everything will get canceled. And so it's kind of nice to have those weather days. And we look at them as kind of this like magical pause in our family, like where we're just kind of cocooned off from the world. And so that's kind of how I've always seen these weather events, these weather days. But this time it was different. So we went on Monday. We drove down to Atlanta. So it's like a 6-hour drive from us. So it's just far enough to be far, but manageable. So the 5 of us, we drove down to Atlanta because we went to the college football national championship game because our Ohio State Buckeyes played in it. And, Tig and I both went to Ohio State. And so we're all super big Ohio State fans. And so it's kind of like, especially football, it's the thing that we all share, the thing that we all have in common. And so it was a no-brainer that we were making it down there for this game. And so it was super fun, but there was the storm coming. So we had the snowstorm coming. So we hurried to get back to Wilmington, and we did. We made it perfectly. We made it back just in time. Like we watched videos the later in the evening of like Atlanta getting pounded by snow and like the whole route home getting pounded by snow. And then of course, we did. And so it was like we made it just in the nick of time. But as we were driving home, I had the realization that I'm like, gosh, I don't know if Tobias is going to stay at home. Like he's probably going to go back to campus. And so my instinct at first was to say something along the lines of, are you going to stay at home? Are you going back to campus? But then I'm like, well, gosh, I don't want to make him feel guilty if he's going back, but I also don't want him to go back. Like I just kind of assumed, I guess I really didn't think about it, that he would be hurrying back to school, like to his friends, to his roommate, to his dorm, to where he realistically is supposed to be on a Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening. So instead of asking, I just like didn't say anything. And I did. I kept thinking about it repeatedly on the ride home. But it was more like I was afraid of asking him because I kind of knew what his response was going to be. And I didn't want to make him say it because I know what kind of kid he is. And I know that he would feel bad for not coming home, not being at home. And I didn't want him to feel bad. But I felt bad. And so I didn't mention it. Well, then he gets a phone call from one of his friends and I hear him and his friend's like asking, like, where are you? When are you going to be back? And I realized that, yeah, he needed to go back. That was where he was supposed to be. And I think that people oftentimes assume that because he's local, because, he's 8 minutes away. And, it's funny because whenever I hear him tell somebody, he tells them that he's like 12 minutes from home. It's like, you're not 12 minutes from home. I've driven that drive like a zillion times to campus. You're 8 minutes from home. But it's funny, like he totally rounds up. So I don't know what that means. Or maybe I'm rounding down. Who knows what that means? But I think people typically default to, well, he's down the street, so it's not hard. And I will give you that in some ways. It's certainly not as hard. And I totally know how lucky I am to have him so close by. But the reality is that doesn't make it easier. It's still different. It's still really hard. And just having the other two and I home together, it highlighted like that empty space where he would normally be. And I felt it, and I know they felt it too. I overheard my middle say a couple of times, I wish Tobias was here. And the two of them went out and they were throwing snowballs and they were having fun in the snow and they were running and had the puppy running outside because she totally loved it. But the dynamic, it was just different. And I couldn't help feel his absence much more deeply than I have in all of these months, which is weird. And I don't really know why that is that I felt it so much more. Maybe it's, when he's typically not home, we're all in and out of the house. There's, the kids are gone at school and then my middle comes home earlier and then they're at practices and I'm in and out and everybody's just kind of moving around. And it's very different than when it's like, oh, we're all sequestered here in the house. I watched the movie Conclave last night. Can you tell? We're all sequestered here in the house and he's not. And so it kind of became much more notable. And I know it's funny because the first morning that we had snow, a good friend of mine whose son is also a freshman, but he's a couple of hours away at college, she texted me and she's like, snow days just aren't the same or as fun without kids in the house. And it really resonated with me because it's like, okay, it's not just me. Because these moments like this, they remind us of how our family life evolves as our kids grow up. And, it's bittersweet, isn't it? It's like you miss them being around, but you also know that being where they are, whether it's at college or they're then off working or they're pursuing their own journeys, it's exactly where they need to be. And I could have asked Tobias to come home. I could have asked him just to come home with us. I could have said, oh, we're going to have so much fun, or, oh, it'll be like the old days, or whatever. But I know that he was supposed to be on campus. I know that he was supposed to be making memories with his friends and with his roommate and with the girl that he's talking to. And it's like, I know that that's what it's supposed to be. And so it would have been totally selfish of me to try to make him feel guilty for not being here where he's not supposed to be. And even though I know this in my head, it's okay, and I'm saying this to myself, but maybe this is you too, but I'm totally telling myself it's okay to feel the loss of those days when we were all together the way that we were. And it's okay to miss those moments. And it made it then, once the others were doing schoolwork at the kitchen table, it became much more poignant to me because it made me think back to the COVID year. And that was a time when everybody was there. We were all there. Everything was paused. We were all together in a way that we hadn't been since before they went off to school. And snow days this week reminded me of that time. And, maybe that's why it felt a little bit heavier on my heart. And, my husband, he doesn't feel the same. He doesn't have that same sense of loss. And it's, a couple of reasons. First of all, his job kind of keeps him out a lot more, even during those times when the rest of the world is kind of, shut off. He is like I don't want to say first responder. Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of what he is, but he tends to work through hurricane stuff. He worked through COVID. He worked through snowstorms. His business doesn't stop. And so he's not around the way that I'm around. And it's not that he doesn't love or miss Tobias, but his life and like his daily rhythms are just not as intertwined with the kids as mine are. And so, I think that that's a dynamic that many moms can relate to. And I think that that's one of the reasons that many of us tend to feel these shifts much more severely, because so much of our lives have been built around our kids and their schedules and their needs and just feeling their presence. And so I thought today that we could have a conversation to make me feel better. But we could actually, it's funny because he did come home today and he popped in. And actually, it's funny because I didn't know it was a pop in. So that was interesting too, because he came home and it was like, yay, the roads are clear. You can drive. And, he drove home and he was here, and I had a meeting. And so I was in a Zoom meeting, and it was just nice having him here. And then a couple of their friends came over. And so it was just nice having everybody around. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to head back to campus now before it gets dark. And I'm like, what? Wait, what? You're heading back? Where are you going? Why are you going? I wanted to say that, but the reality is I didn't want to make him feel bad. If he had planned on going back to campus, he planned on going back to campus. And I am trying to let him, I mean, not that I'm letting him, but I'm trying to emotionally let him, I think is a good way to try to not guilt him and remove that idea of guilt from it. And so I'm trying to let that happen. And so I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't realize you were going back. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to go back and see what's going on. Maybe I'll come back if there's nothing really going on. And I'm like, okay, well, don't feel like you have to stay there if you don't want to be there, but also don't feel guilty if you don't come home, if you have something else going on. I try to play that way. Don't feel bad about whatever. But inside, I'm like, oh, he's leaving again. But realistically, it's where he's supposed to be. So I thought that we should have a conversation about some theory behind understanding these emotional shifts and why we feel them, what they mean for our families. So we're going to kind of revisit a little bit of family systems theory and talk about developmental stage theory, and then that old stability-change relational dialectic. There's a lot of different things that can kind of help us unpack what's happening beneath the surface of my heart and maybe some of y'all's. So family systems theory, it teaches us, you may remember, we've talked about it before, that our families are this interconnected social system, that it's constantly functioning with this degree of predictable reality. We know that when one thing happens, another things happen, then something else happens. We know how these daily interactions, how they typically proceed. We know what role each person plays in our system. We know the processes that work. We know the rules that exist. We know all of this, and we all feel each other, that we feel the pull. And I've mentioned this before, that we are all standing around in a circle with bungee cords attached to us. And when one person pulls, the others feel it, because we are this system where everything is interconnected and everything is interdependent. And we each play roles within our system. For example, Tobias has always played the role that many typical older siblings do. He kind of sets the tone for things. He has this sense of leadership and this sense of balance. And there's a dynamic that naturally flows because he knows and everyone else knows his role and our roles in the system. And then when he is gone, well, what happens? There's like a hole. There's a role that isn't being fulfilled. And so Cain and Ever, like, they have to kind of step into those roles. And so, yeah, just like a role of his is to take out the trash when I need it, a role of his is also to kind of be the connector between the other two, a connector with me, a connector with my husband. Like, he's just kind of a connecting force between everyone. That's just kind of his personality, or maybe birth order, but that's a role that he plays. And so when he is gone, just like I have to find somebody else to take out the trash because I don't want to. So I have to find somebody else to take out that trash and fill that role. There's also a need for somebody to fill that kind of central leadership connection role too. And so we all know our roles. And so for me, his absence, it feels like we're losing a part of the system's stability. And we, just like any other family, when one person leaves the family system, like how he left for college, the system has to adjust. And the system does adjust, and we have adjusted. But then you have like a snow day when the rest of us are all together in this familiar rhythm of being all in the house and no one else around because no one can drive, and we've got this housebound rhythm going. His absence becomes much more pronounced. It's a disruption to what was once a predictable system. And I've told you before, we like predictability. We all like predictability. Uncertainty makes us uncomfortable. And so that's kind of what ended up happening, was that there was an uncertainty because this wasn't a dynamic that we were used to. And so we didn't know how to proceed. And so by looking at our family through family systems theory, we can kind of understand a little bit more that it's not just sadness. It's a recalibration. The whole system has to recalibrate. It's recognizing that the family dynamic has shifted, and we all just need to kind of figure out how to find that balance again. Now, another theory, developmental stage theory, it gives us another lens to look at it through. So we know that families move through stages as our kids grow up and then as they leave home. We are currently, those of us with children in college and one of those years after college, that kind of age, we are in what's called the launching stage. And the launching stage is where our kids transition to independence. And we are, I guess, launching them into that independence. And that can be exciting and it can be challenging for parents, because in this stage, we are simultaneously letting go and we are holding on for dear life. And snow days like this, they kind of put that tension between those two things to the front of my head. It's a reminder of what was, and it's highlighting what is changing. And while I want my kids to grow and I want them to thrive, I don't want him to want to come and sit at home because he's unhappy at college. He doesn't have any friends. He doesn't have any fun there. And he's maybe not comfortable in himself. And he's shy or insecure or whatever it is. And so he wants to be at home. I, I guess I do want that kind of for myself, but I don't want that. I want him to be happy on campus. I want him to be happy with his friends. I want him to be sending me texts telling me how fun it is, how fantastic of a time he's having. I want to see the videos of the kids running around, dragging each other on skim boards and boogie boards and, just even standing there like happy to get covered in snow and just the screaming and the yells and the like laughter. And I want all of that for him. And so I'm so thankful that he had that. But, yeah, that is kind of like, we want him to grow and thrive, but there is kind of that natural grieving process for days that are behind us now. And so I can think of, when they would go out and build their teeny tiny snowmen. And I can think about when we hooked them up to one of those little baby 4x4 little vehicle things and pulled them on their, well, I guess it wasn't a sled. We must have pulled them on their, oh gosh, what was it? I guess they're boogie boards we pulled them on. And so those are just memories now. And while I wouldn't trade his growth for anything, that doesn't mean there isn't a bittersweetness in watching those moments become memories. So looking at it through this developmental stage theory, we are in a natural stage of development for this feeling. It's one that once our kids are thoroughly launched, supposedly gets easier. I don't know. I haven't gotten there yet. I'm telling you what the research tells me. We will see when I shall get there. The other way to look at it is something else that we talked about, stability change, those relational dialectics. Another concept of this push-pull type of thing, these bipolar opposites. And we talked about relational dialectics. They're those things that on the surface, they seem opposite, but we need both in order to feel balanced. And on one hand, we crave that stability of having everyone home together in like those comfortable, predictable rhythms. But on the other hand, we know that change is necessary for growth. It's necessary for growth for the kids and for us as parents. And so this dialectic isn't just about them leaving. It's about us being able to find stability in our own lives amidst these changes. And so, for me, that means working through my own feelings of loss and adjusting my expectation of what these weather days or any family time, I guess, what it looks like now. I've realized that finding part of that stability means letting myself feel the sadness, get all up in my feels for a minute, but not getting stuck in it. It's about recognizing that this change is a sign of growth. It's not just a sign of growth for Tobias, but it's a sign of growth for me and for the rest of our family too. So, how do we get through this? We come to this podcast and we know that somebody else is out there feeling exactly the same that we do. Yes, of course. But other than that, how do we navigate these shifts in a way that both supports our teens, it strengthens our family? Oh, and it, I guess, honors our own feelings too, because we can't forget about that. So, all right. Well, first, we need to remove any degree of guilt from our teens. It's natural to miss them. But it's important not to make them feel guilty for growing up and for pursuing their independence. I do think that I am very good at this. Guilt is very genetically bred into me. I come from a long line of guilt-ridden Irish Catholics, and I am breaking that generational trauma. I have worked very hard to make certain that there is no guilt. And so I do kind of think I've got this one under control. It's important not to make them feel bad. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Share your feelings in a way that does let them know that they are loved and they are missed without adding any pressure to change their plans. Because if you are trying to avoid guilt, there is also that slippage where you're kind of overcompensating a little bit. And when you overcompensate, it almost makes them feel like, yeah, cool, it's good. We don't miss you at all. We're chilling here. We're good. And that doesn't make the situation better either. So you need to find a way to make them know that, yes, you love them. Yes, you miss them. And yes, they are welcome to be at home, at your house, whenever they want to be. But there's no pressure to do what you want them to do. There is no pressure to become 7 again. There is no pressure to change their plans. Number 2, create new traditions. So yeah, maybe our snow days or other family rituals, maybe they feel different now, but we can use it as an opportunity to create new ones. I told you this back at New Year's that in the past, we always celebrated New Year's together as a family when the kids were little and stuff. My husband and I, we didn't go out and celebrate New Year's. We always celebrated it together with the kids. And we always did our little fondue and we did our little, horns and hats and all of that stuff, the countdown. We did all of that together. And it was super, super fun. But as they got older, I kind of realized that, you know what, that's just probably not going to cut it anymore with them. And I wanted to keep a tradition alive. And so now for the last, probably 5 New Year's, maybe. Now we go up to the mountains and we spend New Year's at the mountains. We still hang out together. We still do a fondue together. My parents and my sister and her family come too. And it's really nice, but we've created a new tradition. I don't know why. I guess I have snow on my mind that the mountains is the best tradition that I can come up with. But, it can be as simple as a group FaceTime, share stories in a group FaceTime or sending photos back and forth in order to stay connected. I mentioned football. We have a fantasy football league, our family does. And that was so fun all through fall. And we've done that the last couple of years. And now this year was really fun because Tobias wasn't in the house all the time. So it was kind of a good way to stay connected. We have that app. I don't know if y'all have it. It's called Lock It. And it's cute. Like you can have like a widget on your screen. I think that's what they're called, right? A widget. But you can have that. I think it's a widget, right? A widget on your screen and it has the picture pop up. And so it's kind of like, I guess, like a Snapchat. I know a lot of people do use Snapchat to stay in touch with their families, but we text a lot as a group text. And then we also have this locket. So we can see pictures of each other throughout the day, just like I'll get a random picture of his roommates or, I'll get a random picture from my middle when he's at weight training, or, my daughter will send a picture from class or whatever. And so that can be a new way to kind of feel connected. But by creating new traditions, especially if you can kind of tailor the old one a little bit into a new tradition, it can give you that same sense of stability while allowing for that change. Number 3, communicate. That's always my answer, right? Communicate, but communicate openly. Talk with them. Talk about how these changes feel for everyone. Let them share their feelings, their experiences too. Because, like, I know he misses home more than I probably even realize. And I know how much he misses being at home. But communicating and keeping that open. And again, it's not that you're trying to guilt them, but you also don't want to go too far to make it seem like you don't care. Number 4, lean into your own growth. I don't think that I would have even managed as well this week if I hadn't been throwing myself into work, which, by the way, I was so productive this week, probably related. So that's good. But as our kids grow up and change, it's an opportunity for us. We know this, right? It's an opportunity for us to grow and change too. And so it's good for us to do that reflection on what we want and what do we want life to look like. And if we can put ourselves into our passions and our hobbies or relationships, if we can cultivate ourselves, then it doesn't make it the heartbreak of not having that go away, but it does fill that void with other things that bring us joy. Number 5, acknowledge different experiences. We have to realize that it's okay. Everybody handles things in different ways. And oftentimes our partners don't necessarily feel the shifts the same way that we do, and that's okay. But what we're going to want to do is we want to make sure that we can at least, again, communicate with them about our experiences and find ways to support each other without needing to fully understand each other's feelings. Maybe with our friends, we may not feel the exact same way, but to talk about it just allows us no more than when my friend texted me. We were kind of having different experiences in some ways because has an only and he's off at school. So she completely had an empty house, whereas I had the other 2 at home. And so I was also whereas she was looking at it probably more just through the lens of nostalgia or sadness, I couldn't help but feel almost the hurt for my other 2. And I don't want to say, I don't know what the word is because it wasn't like anger or even irritation, but kind of like almost like, well, why can't you be in 2 different places? So it's like unrealistic, obviously, but I didn't like that. I felt like they didn't have him here. And I know that they wanted him. And so it was a different perspective. It was a different relationship, a different situation, just like my husband and I even have different feelings about things. And that doesn't mean that the others aren't valid. And so having communication about it and supporting other people in their journeys and in their own feelings, we don't need to feel the same way in order to empathize with how they're feeling. Change is hard. There's no 2 ways about it. It is bittersweet, but it's also an opportunity for us to grow and to redefine what our family is and what family connection looks like. And so these days of sequestering, I can't stop saying that, days of sequestering and because of weather or whatever, they may not look like they used to, but they can still be meaningful in other new ways. And so as we are all here navigating these challenges, we're doing it together. And so let's just give ourselves some grace and some compassion because this isn't just about letting go of our teens. It's also about finding ourselves again. Thank you so much for being here today and always, and giving me a place to come when I'm feeling a little bit of heaviness on my heart. And it's nice to have friends here to be able to share it with. If you've enjoyed the show or if it's resonated with you, please share it with your friends because that's how we'll grow our little community. Reach out to me on socials. It's Reframing Me everywhere. And until next time, be well and communicate.